Hello there, welcome to our science lesson, the topic responses. Remember, in our previous lessons, we have talked about the nervous system, and we said nervous system, the major function is to detect changes in the environment, generate impulses, send the impulses to the central nervous system, and then later central nervous system sends another impulse called motor impulse to effector organ for response to take place. So we know that there are so many changes that takes place around our bodies, either externally or internally. So when there are changes in the environment, we call that change in the environment as a stimuli. Those changes, if there are many, this is a plural form, stimuli. If it is just one change, it is called a stimulus, singular form. So those changes in the environment, they will make or they will stimulate sense organs. The changes, the stimuli or the stimulus, they generate or they stimulate the sense organs to generate nerve impulse. So it leads to generation of nerve impulse. So once the sense organ has generated the nerve impulse, it will be conducted via sensory neuron. Via sensory neuron to the central nervous system. Central nervous system, we said, is majorly made up of the brain and the spinal cord. And then from central nervous system, via or through the motor neuron. And then that impulse will reach effector organs. And the appropriate response will be generated. In our previous lessons, we have used an example of, for instance, if you touch a hot object. When you touch a hot object, we are going to have sense organs being stimulated. When that's stimulated, because it's a change in the environment, we are calling that one stimuli or a stimulus. There will be generation of a nerve impulse, which will be conducted via sensory neuron to central nervous system, the brain, and the spinal cord. And to the motor neuron to effector organs. Effector organ here could be muscles. The muscles of your arm, if you are touching, is going to contract and it lifts that arm from the hot object. That is an example of a response. So there are several responses in the human body, either through nervous system or through the endocrine system. So as we talk about responses, then it becomes very important for us to talk about the origin of nerve impulses, sense organs. So it is in these sense organs where there is generation of the nerve impulse. Sense organs. So from what we can understand is that sense organs are those structures that will detect the changes in the environment. They will generate a nerve impulse, and that nerve impulse will be conducted to the central nervous system for interpretation. So the major role of sense organs in responses or in generating responses when environment changes is to generate impulses. Generates impulses after detecting. Generates impulses after detecting changes in the environment. We have said those changes in the environment, the changes in the environment are also referred to as stimuli if it is in plural form, and stimulus singular form. So one condition for a nerve impulse to be generated, we must have a change in the environment, and then sense organs come in to now generate the, first of all, to be stimulated, and then they generate the nerve impulse. Sense organs include the following sense organs in our bodies. One of them is the eye. We know that the eye usually detects a change in the environment, specifically if there are changes in light. The stimulus will be light. If there are changes in light, you can be able to detect that. We have a sense organ, ear. The stimuli that will make the ear generate a nerve impulse is sound. The way I'm talking, you are getting it, because when I produce different sounds, those are changes in the environment, and the ear comes in handy to detect the change. Skin is also a very important sense organ, because one of the stimuli that you detect is temperature. If there is change in temperature, if it is too hot, too cold, it's the skin that will tell you that there are changes in the environment. It will generate the impulses that will be sent to the central nervous system, and then central nervous system will now generate another, will interpret, and then there will be some responses. If it is putting on a sweater, if the body, through some physiological means, it can increase the output of maybe heat through shivering, through initiating exothermic reactions in the liver. It is by the skin that has detected the change in temperature, and then it has generated a nerve impulse which was sent to the central nervous system. In the central nervous system, there was a motor response or a motor impulse. Another stimuli will be pressure. For instance, if somebody steps on your toe, you are going to get the pain because, or you are going to get that there's something happening because of the nerve impulses that has been generated in the skin. Also, pain. If you go to the hospital and then maybe the only means of administering drugs is through injection, you will feel pain when the doctor or the nurse is injecting you with the drugs. The other sense organ is the tongue. Now, we are able to differentiate different types of tests because of the tongue. The tongue is an example of a sense organ, is able to detect changes in taste. So the stimuli will be the tastes. It could be sour taste, a bitter taste, a sweet taste, several types of tastes. And then we have the nose, olfactory cells. olfactory cells. So the nose is able to detect a stimuli. For instance, if maybe something is dead and it has been left for a long time without being attended to, if an animal dies, it will start decaying and in the process produces smell, specifically hydrogen sulfide smell. So the stimuli here is odor. So I want to look at each one of them. But before we look at each of these sense organs, we must first of all find out what makes sense organs so special in that they are able to detect the changes in the environment and in the process generate a nerve impulse. So sense organs are able to do that, detecting change in the environment and generate a nerve impulse, because sense organs are made of sensory cells. These sensory cells are associated together, to form specialized organs, that can detect changes in the environment. So it is because of these sensory cells. So the eye has its special sensory cells. We are going to look at it. The nose, the olfactory cells. The skin has sensory cells. The tongue has sensory cells. But they are usually grouped together. When they are grouped together, they will result into a specialized. They are grouped together or associated together, resulting into a specialized organ for purpose of detecting the change in the environment, which later follows generation of a nerve impulse. The eye. So we look at the first one, the eye. Now, if you are in a room and it's dark right now, we can do together something. You may just approach the switch and put off the light. You realize that there is a transformation in the environment. It was light, and then it has become dark. So the eye is one of those organs or structure that is very important in detecting or telling what is around us. So most of the people rely on the eyes for several things. If you want to drive a car along the highway, you need your eyes properly. If you have to look at the monitor of your computer, you need your eyes. Right now, wherever you are looking at this whiteboard. I'm writing some words, and then you are able to read those words because you are using your eyes. So people rely on eyes for several functioning or for purpose of comfortable living in the environment. If you have to jump from one point to another or from a given height, you can only detect the height onto which you can jump safely using your eyes. You are cooking food, you'll need your eyes so that you can be able to cook it properly. You are watching TV, the channels, sports, something like that. The eye comes in handy. So to find a way around our environment, we need the eyes. So we shall rely mostly on eyes for those purposes. Although we have some exceptional cases where you can actually detect the environment without using the eye. Suppose, for instance, we have a blackout and there is no backup for light. You realize that still you can make your way around your room, maybe through touch. You'll be touching on the walls and then you can be able to move around. Also, for these people that are blind, their life does not come to a halt just because the eyes are not functioning. They're able to continue living a normal life, maybe through technology and other means. They can read and write just like you do with your normal eyes, maybe through the Braille system. So the eyes gives people ability to make way around their environment. Function of the eye. Now you have realized that if you did our first illustration, switching off the light, you have realized that without light, the eyes cannot work properly. In a very dark room, your eyes become functionless. They can't help you. So that one can lead us to the function of the eye. So the role of the eye is to perceive light. Once light has been perceived, then you can be able to distinguish different objects around your environment. So light is very important. So the role of the eye is just one. Perception of light, perceives light. Perceives light. Since the light is the major stimulus, perceives light, by which perceives light by which one can distinguish objects around self. Around self. So it is the light that will get into your eye. We are going to find out how this happens. The light gets into your eye and then an image is formed on some parts of the eye as real image that is interpreted into a normal object. So it perceives light, and in the process it is going to enable you distinguish objects around you or around someone. Where do you find the eye location? You already know where the eyes are. When we are looking at the skeletal system, we identified some parts of the body that are found in the skull. We mentioned brain, we mentioned the middle ear and the inner ear. And then we also mentioned the eye. The eyes are located or found in the skull, but specific point, the eye socket. Found in the skull, but specific point, the eye socket. The eye socket. That is important because if they were just found, for instance, on top of your head, on top of the skull, because the eyes are made up of very sensitive cells, it could cause damage to this. So the role of, or the reason why the eyes will be found in the skull, specifically in the eye socket, is for protection against mechanical damage. Protection against mechanical damage. Maybe if you become a researcher, specifically in forestry, if you have an interest in forestry, in ecology, you will be going through thickets or forests where we have branches and several other things. So as you are moving around, branches will be going over your head and several other points. So the eye being in the socket, it is going to give it protection. But still in this eye socket, there is a lining of fat that also absorbs or cushions the eye against shocks. Therefore, in that process, we say it acts as a shock absorber. So we are saying if that's the eye socket, if I may use that diagram, that's the eye socket. Underlying this eye socket is a fat layer. Is a layer of fat, and then the eyeball will be there. So the reason why we have a fat layer is to cushion the eyeball against mechanical shocks. So in the socket is a layer of fats, a layer of fats that cushions the eye against mechanical shocks. So in essence, it acts as a shock absorber. The layer of fats act as a shock absorber. The layer of fats absorbs shocks. What kind of shocks are we talking about here? For instance, if you are a soccer player, there are moments when you'll be required to hit that ball using your head. When you hit the ball with your head, remember the eyes are in the skull, are found in the head. There will be some reactionary forces between the ball and your head. It can produce some shocks, but your eyes are not going to be damaged in any way because of a layer of fat that is found in the eye socket. Again, in this socket, we have some muscles. We have some muscles. We have three types of muscles that will be lining the eyeball. And in the process, they are attached to the eye socket. So we can use a diagram here just to show the position of those muscles. If that's the eyeball, we shall have some muscles. We have those muscles on each side of the eye. We have some muscles on the lower side and on the upper and lower side of the eyeball, of course attached to the eye socket. And you also have some muscles going in a vertical way. So those two muscles, or those muscles, are called rectus muscles, but the upper and lower, the upper one is called superior rectus muscle. The lower is inferior rectus muscle. So what is the role of these two? The role of the two is to move the eyeball up and down. Sometimes if you have to look up, you don't have to lie horizontally on the ground and then look up. You lift your head a little bit, and then these superior muscles will contract and the eyeball faces up. Inferior rectus muscle. You don't have to lie on the ground in a prostrate manner to see anything. You will bend your head a little bit, and then together with the inferior rectus muscle contracting. When it contracts, the eyeball faces down. Therefore, you are able to perceive something on the ground. So the role of superior and inferior rectus muscles is to move the eyeball up and down. Up, down. Moves the eyeball. Up and down. Moves the eyeball up and down. Now sometimes you'll need to move your eyes sideways, without actually making the whole body look in that direction or in this direction. So we have this muscle on either side of the eyeball called lateral rectus muscle. Lateral rectus muscle to move the eyeball from side to side. We have this muscle here. It's also on both sides. This is two-dimensional diagram, so I cannot show on the other side. We have this one, the one that's steady, for steady movement or steady state of the eye. Sometimes the eyeball, maybe if you are taking a photo, it will have to be in a very particular position, a constant position. For that to happen, we require this type of muscles. Those muscles are called oblique rectus muscle. Oblique rectus muscle for steady, for making the eyeball steady or steadiness of eyeball, steadiness of eyeball. So rectus, we have said, for moving eyeball sideways movement of the eyeball. Sideways movement of the eyeball. So we are looking at this because the eye does not just function on as an independent entity. It also depends on other structures around it. So parts of the eye. Now, for us to understand how the eye functions, we need to understand the parts of the eye so that we can comprehend very well how the eye is going to receive light, perceive and distinguish objects around ourselves. So for that purpose, we shall draw the eye, a small sketch of the same. I'll do a sketch, not a very exact diagram, but a sketch of the same. So that is a general structure of the eye. We shall label those parts together. So that transparent curved layer is called the cornea. And then we have, remember it also has eyelid. But under this eyelid is a thin membrane, a thin transparent membrane. That thin transparent membrane that does not actually cover the cornea. There's a thin transparent membrane which do not cover the cornea, is called conjunctiva. It extends So let us go. That transparent curved surface, cornea, there's a thin transparent membrane that's made up of some tough connective tissues, the conjunctiva, and then the outer membrane or the outer layer called the sclera, sometimes also called sclerotic layer. So if you have that photo somewhere, you can go together with me as we label. So the outer layer, there is a conjunctiva, thin transparent membrane. This one does not cover the cornea, but it's just thin, covering the eyeball, not every part. Conjunctiva, then sclerotic layer. The other layer that follows sclerotic layer, this part, some dark pigmented layer with a lot of blood vessels and nerves, is called the choroid layer. Choroid layer. And then we have another part here where sensory cells that perceives or detect changes in light are situated, is called the retina. Retina, this is the third layer. So we have three major layers: sclerotic layer, the choroid layer, and the retina. Other parts, we have a fluid, clear fluid just found at or beneath the cornea. This one is called aqueous humor. Aqueous humor. Aqueous humor is found in a chamber. This is a space-filled fluid. The fluid is aqueous humor. That chamber is called anterior chamber. So in anterior chamber, we have the aqueous humor. We shall be looking at the functions of each. So it is found at that point. Then we have those muscle kind of structure. That part is called the iris. It has two types of muscles: radial muscle and circular muscle. But it is a complete ring. This is a cross section. It's a complete ring that way. So it will be made up of muscles, but it leaves a hole inside. That hole is called the pupil. The pupil. If you look at the eye of your friend, you realize that the iris is that colored part. It could be dark or any other color, but there is another part that is translucent. It does not have very clear color. That one is called the pupil. Then after that, we have a very important part of the eye, the lens. The lens. From the diagram, you can see it is a curved structure, but on two sides, this side and on the other side. It has two curved surfaces. So because of that, and they are curved outwards, when a lens is curved outward, we say it is convex. But because they are two sides, then we say it is biconvex. Bi means two, biconvex. If it is curved, a lens curved, convex. But there are two sides of the lens that are curved, it becomes biconvex. So it's a biconvex lens. It's also filled with a transparent jelly-like substance. We are going to find out the roles. But it is held in position by some structure. You can look at those structures. We have some ligaments there. We call them suspensory ligaments. Suspensory ligaments. Suspensory ligaments. They are the ones that are holding the lens in position. They also have a role when they contract and relax. Suspensory ligaments contracting and relax, they change the shape of the lens. But again, we have another part where those suspensory ligaments arises from. That part is called, let me use that point there, that part is called ciliary muscles. So ciliary muscles is made up of smooth and circular muscles. They contract and relax. When they contract and relax, they bring about tension on suspensory ligaments, which will transfer the same tension to the lens. So the lens can lengthen, decreasing the focal point, or when suspensory ligament relax, the lens goes back to its normal position, increasing the focal point. All of those is to bring about refraction of light. Then we have this chamber here. This chamber is called the posterior chamber. Posterior chamber. But the posterior chamber has fluids. Here we have anterior chamber with aqueous humor. Posterior chamber also has transparent fluid. The fluid that's found here is given a name called vitreous. Vitreous humor. Vitreous humor is called vitreous humor. And then we have mentioned the retina. The retina has the sensory cells for light. But we have some points on the retina where we have more or high concentration of those cells that perceive light. That point where it is curved is called fovea. Fovea. Fovea, that point. Sometimes also given a name, fovea centralis. Fovea centralis. And then we have a point here where, I'll use that point, where the nerves and blood vessels get joined to the eyeball. We call that one as blind spot. Blind spot. Blind spot, because even if an image is going to fall at that point, it's not going to be perceived. Reaching the blind spot cannot be perceived. And then we have the last part, the optic nerve. Optic nerve. Optic nerve is emanating from the retina. Remember, the retina is the one that has cells that receive light. So this is a generalized structure of the eye. You can remember very well that we have that part, transparent part, the cornea. We have aqueous humor. We are going to look at each role of each part as we move on. So I want to find out how are they important. But apart from these structures, we also have other accessory parts of the eye, like the tear glands, like the eyebrows. So we can group them into accessory parts first, and then the main parts, accessory parts. 1, the eyebrows. The eyebrows. Now, when you look at a human being, and you want to get to the eye, the first thing that you see are the eyebrows. What are these eyebrows? That raised portion of the skin just above the eye, that part. And you can see the structure. It's raised portion, it's coming out a little bit from the skull, and then it has hairs. So what could be the role of that point? Why should we have hairs at that place? So this is the raised portion of the skin above the eye. But one major feature of these eyebrows is that it has thick hairs. Thick hairs. The eyebrows has thick hairs. Why should it have thick hairs? Probably you have experienced this. If you have worked in a dusty environment, or you have been playing, when you play, there's sweat coming out from the head and the other parts of the body. So before the sweat or dust gets into your eye, you realize that it would be trapped a little bit by the thick hairs on the eyebrows. So the thick hairs, that is, they trap dust particles and sweat from reaching the eye. Then we have other parts like the eyelid. Eyelid is not the major part of the eye. But if you look at the eyelid, it's not just one. Every eye has 2 eyelids. Just like we have drawn, that will be the eyelid. That will be the eyelid. So these 2 folds of the skin, 2 folds of the skin that usually covers the eyeball. And at the end of this eyelid, we have some hair-like structures. We have some hairs. So I want to find out what is the role of those hairs again. So we are saying the eyelid is made up of 2 folds of the skin. But at the end, we have hairs. So again, if, for example, you are going through a rough environment or in a bush, a thicket, sometimes they'll brush your eyes. So you need to close your eyes a little bit and then open when it is clear. So the role of these is 2. one, protection of the eyeball. How will it happen? They are going to close if there is a danger that can damage the eye. And then hairs. Again, if you drive through a very dusty road, or you are riding your bicycle in a dusty environment, you'll realize that before the dust gets into your eye, they'll be trapped by the hairs on the eyelid. We call those hairs as eyelashes. They are called eyelashes. And the role is to, again, just like for the eyebrows, trap dust particles and sweat from getting into the eye, The other accessory part is the tear gland. The tear gland. Tear gland is also referred to as lagrimal gland. Also called lagrimal gland. The role of tear gland is to secrete tears. Secretes tears. So, what is this tears? Tears is simply a clear fluid that is saline. It is saline. In other words, if you test the tears, they will slightly have a salt taste, saline and antiseptic. Saline and antiseptic. When we say something is antiseptic, it means it has the ability to kill bacteria. Not many of them, but susceptible bacteria. Bacteria that can succumb to the effect of salinity that's found in the tears. Tears has some roles. One of them is to moisten. Roles of tears. Tears usually moistens the cornea. The eye is not supposed to be too dry. How many? 10. Moistens the cornea. It's not supposed to be too dry. So tears will come in handy so that to make the eye or the eyeball or the cornea to be wet or moist. Another role. Now sometimes when particles fall into your eye, very small one, they'll get out through the tears. If an insect gets into your eye, a small one, the tear gland are stimulated, and in the process they produce a lot of tears. So in the process, as a lot of tears is coming out, if there was dust, if there was a particle in form of an insect, it will come out. So it washes out dust particles. And solids and even insects, small insects. And then to put in use the antiseptic nature of tears. We have said antiseptic means ability to kill bacteria, which is a pathogen. So also kills. The tears are able to kill some pathogens. You can do this experiment on your own. You can identify a culture of bacteria. Maybe if you go to your laboratory, you'll be given a culture of bacteria. And then using an onion, you squeeze the onion in close to your eyes, the tears will come out, and then you put a drop. If this is a petri dish, a petri dish with a culture of bacteria, you can go and drop your tears on that plate and then culture it for some few days in a very good environment, not too much heat, not too much cold. You realize that at that point, when you observe through a microscope, that point will have less bacteria, it will have clearings, some clearings. You realize that if there were so many like that at that point, bacteria are all over, the point where you dropped your tears will have some clearing, showing that tears have ability to kill some pathogens. And indeed it is important, so that because it is the exposed part of your body is open, we must have ways of preventing invasion into the bloodstream through the eyes. But remember, we have some resistant pathogens or bacteria that cannot succumb to antiseptic nature of the tears. Then part B, the real parts of the eye. We have mentioned parts like the cornea. Now we have said on that diagram as I was drawing, I said something about the cornea. We said cornea is a transparent layer. It's a transparent layer, but it is curved. That is curved. Transparent layer that is curved. So I'm emphasizing two features. Curved, that is curved, or that has a curved surface. Being transparent will allow light to pass through it so that it can reach the inner parts of the eye. And then also being curved. When a surface is curved and can allow light to pass through it, it increases the refractive index for refraction of light. So one important role of cornea being transparent allows light to reach inner parts, or to pass to inner parts of the eye. And then again being curved for refraction of light. Refracts light. Why should light be refracted from an object? So that it can be able to be focused on the retina for focusing on the retina. You have come across this term refraction in physics lesson or in any other science class. Refraction means bending of light. For instance, if that's the curved surface that we are talking about and the light is coming from up that point, it will be slightly bent. And then we have other structures that will continually bend the light until it is focused on the retina, specific side, the fovea centralis. Part number 2 is conjunctiva. The conjunctiva. Conjunctiva, we have said, is a thin membrane. It's a thin membrane. Now you can refer to the diagram that we have just drawn. A thin membrane that lines the eyelid and the eyeball. But remember, it does not cover the cornea, but does not cover the cornea. So the role of conjunctiva is to simply provide protection to the eyeball. Protects eyeball. So most of the structures that are found on the outside of the eyeball are meant for protection. Structure number 3, which is the last for this lesson, we have a structure called the iris. Now, iris, we have said, is made up of muscles. It's made up of 2 muscles. The outer muscles of the iris are called radial muscles. Then the inner muscles, are called circular muscles. So the role of iris is to control how much light gets in and out of the into the eye, that is, how much light will get into the eye. But how? Through a hole called the pupil. So light will get through the transparent membrane, that is the cornea, through the aqueous humor, then through the pupil. But this pupil usually increases or decreases in size according to the either relaxation or contraction of the muscles that I've mentioned. And in the process, it's going to control amount of light entering the eye. Remember, if there is a lot of light getting into the eye beyond some capacity, there will be damage to the retina. That's why you're not supposed to. We have some strong lights, like those one of the eclipse. Recently we had an eclipse, the solar eclipse. You are supposed to use some special kind of goggles so that you can look at them. Welding, you cannot do welding on your bare eyes. You must put on goggles so that it can control or limit the amount of light that's passing through the pupil to reach the retina. Otherwise, the retina will be damaged. So we are on a journey to explore the eye, a very important structure. We have just looked at the iris, and in our next lesson, we are going to continue and explain even further how the iris is able to regulate amount of light that gets into the eye. I hope you have enjoyed the lesson. If you have any other questions or other questions, you can always channel to us. We have a contact with you.